I'll take my wasted youth, all these years lost on you, and throw it all away. I'll go back to the start, I'll tear it all apart and throw it all away. Well, people tell me it don't matter, others say just stick it through. I'll bend the soul to all the memories, will never die when I'm with you. We're gonna be young forever. We're gonna be where we're gonna be young forever. We're gonna be young forever. We're gonna be where we're gonna be young forever. So I'll take my wasted youth, trials you put me through, and throw it all away. I'll share the secrets learned, so others won't get burned, and throw it all away. Oh, people tell me it don't matter, others say just stick it through. I'll bend the soul to all the memories, they'll never die when I'm with you.
All of the events shown are the combination of events that we have experienced during the past year. To start off, we would like to define and explain a couple basic concepts, starting off with personality.
Personality is much more than genes, who we are, and the decisions that we make. It is also influenced by the culture where we grew up in. We define culture as a combination of all the behaviors and attitudes we have as humans, knowing why we behave as we do. A person's achievements will determine how they face challenges, how they overcome obstacles, and how they will treat each other in a society. Culture will distort people's perspective of each other, and this will determine how everybody interacts with one another. In addition, several institutional administrators of internationalization strategies from the United States have analyzed the multiculturality concept. They developed a study with the help of the Delphi technique that can be used when there is a need for identified experts to arrive at consensus on a particular issue. And as a result of the study, they found out that there was a wide variety of opinions and definitions among the administrators as to what constitutes intercultural competence. Due to the fact that culture is dynamic, multifaceted, codependent with society, and embedded in contexts, it is very difficult to find an exact definition of multiculturality. However, our team would define this complex term as the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations based on one's intercultural knowledge, skills, and attitudes. There are many aspects that should be included within multiculturality, such as the understanding of others' worldviews, adaptability and adjustment to a new cultural environment, flexibility, and tolerance.
But the real question we want to solve is, how did we become multicultural? But to know our final thoughts, we need to go way back, starting with our native country's background.
Mexico is the home country to more than 120 million people and more than 50 different ethnic groups that are distributed through the 32 states of the country. This nation is one of the most diverse countries in the world in terms of cultural diversity and biodiversity. Having so many different cultures, religions, languages, and ideas have made it very difficult to find a universal way of seeing death. Mexico has a historical presence of many native and foreign cultures. The notion of multiculturalism exists in Mexico from pre-Hispanic times and still prevails nowadays. The commercial activity between the people that live in Mesoamerica before the arrival of the Spaniards placed them in a position of openness, not only economic, but also mental, open to knowledge and acceptance of different ways of life, languages, rights, and beliefs. This phenomenon was also reflected with the arrival of Spaniards, French, and Africans during the colony, 16th century, as well as the Asians and Arabs during the 19th century. Mexican territory has always been a country that has fought for its independence through several conquests and battles. As a consequence, new cultures began to appear. Our country was conquered by Spain in 1521 and turned into a colony, whose name became New Spain. The Catholic Spaniards arrived to Tenochtitlan with the goal of imposing their religion into the Aztecs and practiced a polytheistic religion. The Aztecs worshipped the death and gods by means of offerings. They also carried out human sacrifices in order to have a good weather for their harvests or to avoid diseases. Furthermore, during the conquest, there was a fusion between the Spanish and the Aztecs, which gave birth to new races, like the mestizos, criollos, mulatos, and other new lifestyles. During the 300 years of Spanish ruling, society was divided into different social classes that each had different rights and a role in society. Although the groups of migrants residing in Mexico are diverse, the Lebanese represent a sui generis case. Foreigners who, without knowing the language, customs, and many times the exact geographical location of the country, manage to become fully integrated group into a true transculturation. During the integration of the Arabs in the 19th century, the pioneers faced not only administrative disorganization of Mexico, but also xenophobic waves of local population. Hence, the first Arab immigrants had to translate their name into Spanish or by similarity of the tonality. For example, Fares becomes Felix. They also position themselves in the Mexican society as a group recognized for their commercial, business, cultural, and political skills. Sadly, Mexico's situation doesn't get better over the time. Nowadays, death is the ordinary theme that people listen on their everyday life as a consequence of the high levels of femicides, drug trafficking, dead bodies, violence, and abuse that are present in our country. Unfortunately, people are getting used to this lifestyle full of insecurities and with zero empathy. Humor is a part of the Mexican culture. People make jokes literally of everything, even in the most serious scenarios. Nevertheless, when someone close to you dies, it is taken as something very seriously and in most cases tragic. When it happens to someone close, people mourn for him or her, and usually a funeral is organized by the family. They pray according to their religion, and some even believe in spirits that will take care of them from heaven. Cultural diversity has led to many social issues. There are so many different communities with different cultures in the country in which many of these groups are being discriminated, especially because of the people's beliefs. All of this leads to problems such as bullying and rejection of those people due to their religion, nationality, sexual orientation, and more. In Mexico, society considers that women should stay at home and do the chores, cook, take care of the children, etc. Because of this way of seeing women, when they decide to go against the common way and go out and find a job, they are often discriminated and underpaid, simply for being women. Cultural diversity also poses an economic problem in Mexico, since its citizens have different views on the taxes they pay, the minimum wage that must be offered, and how the government should allocate its budget to best serve its people. Cultural conflicts have affected social issues mainly by having an impact within racism and gender inequality, as I mentioned before. Having a closed mind about the diversity of other cultures automatically places you in between the polarization or even the denial zone of the line that was explained by Ben, which creates conflicts with your surroundings. Monoculturalism may cause other people to feel excluded, isolated, frustrated, and part of a minority. This eventually leads to social resentment within a community with the urge to express their unconformity and anger. And people might take action to demonstrate it throughout strikes or even violent riots. In Mexico, music takes part of the everyday life of the Mexican individual. There are two music genres that are important to society, which are banda and corridos. They come typically from the north of Mexico, but are heard by people all around the country. This was the base for our creation of the first partial project.
For our second partial project, we examined the second largest migration movement of Italians when they moved to Argentina. Argentina is a country located in South America. It has been the birthplace of important people in history such as Eva Duarte de Perón, who had a deep influence in the country's reforms. El Che Guevara, who had a great role in overthrowing governments in South America and has become a symbol of hope for the far left. And even Maradona and Lionel Messi, both considered to be some of the best soccer players in the world. After the fall of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1815, a nationalist movement was led with the intention of unifying Italy. The movement succeeded, but in terms of equity and economy, Italy was extremely divided. the social inequality, the economic crisis due to the poor adaptation of the Italians to the Industrial Revolution, the corruption in the country, and the cholera epidemic were the main reasons why the massive migratory movement started. Argentina is well known for being very welcoming towards immigrants. Starting in 1880 and ending in the 1920s, Argentina had already received 3 million Italian immigrants, representing 45% of the immigrants out of all of them that have come from all around the world to settle down in this country. This makes the Italian immigration within Argentina the second largest and most important migratory movement inside of this country. Nowadays, Argentina has a population of 44 million inhabitants, and the numbers that concern the Italian ascendants in Argentina is of 15 to 20 million people. Nearly half of Argentina's population has Italian blood within them.
Italians have had a great influence in Argentina, enriching their cultural diversity, from something basic like changing the gastronomy to even influencing the language and body expressions when communicating. These contributions have also helped both Argentine and Italian cultures to modify their original values and preferences, which build social cohesion between both cultures.
The cultures equally stimulated the impact, contributing towards their integrated community development. Such was the influence they exercised that besides of the spoken language, the Italians introduced their gestures. Immigrants maintained their customs, and Argentines were just receptive to that. Moreover, the Italians add some dishes to the Argentine gastronomy. Furthermore, the Italian contribution to traditional Argentine music was the majority of tango, which is a musical genre. Immigrants and descendants composed and sang with lyrics based on the anecdotes, hardships, and triumphs of the newcomers of the old continent. On the other hand, in architecture was where the Italians stood out the most. Vittorio Meano and Francisco Tamburini designed and created the Palace of Congress of the Argentine nation and the Casa Rosada, which is where the executive holds responsibility for the governance of the state. Also, each June 3rd, the Italian Immigrant Day is celebrated in the Argentine Republic. This date was chosen in honor of the birth of the Argentine politician, military, and citizen Manuel Belgrano, of Italian descendancy, who was the creator of the flag that today represents this nation. Italy mainly exports machinery, industrial equipment, vehicles, electrical devices, and other manufactured products to Argentina. As for the wine industry, 85% belong to them. Although these percentages have now varied, almost all production areas still have a strong Italian participation, direct or indirectly. Undoubtedly, Argentina proposed economical until 1930, attracting a large volume of Italian investment and human capital. The percentage of foreign capital rose from 32% in 90s to 48% in 1913, as a result of the presentation in Argentina of the most favorable economic and institutional conditions in Latin America for foreign investment. The politics will literally determine the future of a country. The well-being of a nation depends almost entirely on the actions taken by the government. According to these actions, people will react and continue getting a cultural identity based on what happened. During the 20th century, Argentina was almost entirely ruled by members of the military who kept the country unstable. This, combined with the failed War of the Falklands, has made Argentines reject the idea of war and armed conflicts in general. From the oppression of dictators towards freedom of speech, different ways to express feelings were born. An example is the rock song No Bombardeen Buenos Aires by Charly Garcia, that talks about how the Argentines in general felt during the War of the Falklands, how they felt afraid from the enemy and betrayed by their own government. Nevertheless, it is important to mention that in Argentina there are almost 800,000 citizens with the right to vote in Rome, the result of the generous laws that allow the descendants of the immigrants. In this way, many Argentines and Italians residing in Argentina have the right to vote in the elections to elect the Italian parliament. Throughout the years, the presence of Italian companies in Argentina and of companies founded and directed by immigrants of this nationality were incorporated into the economic structure of this country. Italian investments in Argentina cover all sectors of industry. extractive, petrochemical, textile, construction, telecommunication, even agricultural. Additionally, the commercial exchange between Italy and Argentina tripled since 1994.
The vast majority of Italians in Argentina see death as something completely natural that everyone will go through, but as natural as it might be, they still see it as a tragedy.
The team that we were assigned for this same project were investigating the Zulu culture. They are located in the southeastern part of the country and they are the largest ethnic community in South Africa. The Zulus are the largest ethnic community in South Africa. They are mainly located in a region called KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province in South Africa situated in the southeastern part of the country. The main language of this African community is the isiZulu, and it has become one of South Africa's official languages, since around 10 million people are fluent in it. Many of the Zulus live in rural areas where they do not have the basic living conditions, such as electricity, clean water, or hospitals. Since long ago, the Zulus have had a large pastoral and agricultural economy, with wealth being measured in cattle. South Africa used to be a Dutch colony. When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Netherlands, their ruler fled to Great Britain and told the British to take over the Netherlands colonies. The Dutch that live in South Africa strongly disagreed with the English, so they started migrating to uncolonized parts of Africa. Many of these that was the Zulu territory. This created a lot of tension between the Dutch and the English, who wanted to have control over the territory and the Zulu. Several battles were fought between the Zulus and the British. This event is also known as the Anglo-Zulu War, which of course played an important role within the Zulus' history, and the aftermath of this event brought changes to this community. But the resulting war brought the victory over the Zulus, turning the Zulu community into a colony of the British for several years. After this outrageous event, the Zulus became part of South Africa by gaining their independence from the British. The Zulus' religion is based in the worship of natural forces such as rain, the sun, the earth, between others. They only not worship these forces, but they also believe in magic. After colonization, many Zulus converted to Christians, which as a consequence led to a mixture between the traditional beliefs and Christianity. Within the Zulus' religion, they believe that life doesn't finish when someone dies. They are convinced that there is an afterlife in the spiritual world. It is compulsory that when a member of the community dies, he or she must be buried in the traditional way, and they should not be cremated. In the funeral, his or her personal belongings are buried with them in order to make their spiritual journey easy. The Zulus also communicate with their ancestors through dreams, since their ancestors are in the middle between them and God. They also perform sacrifices to the ancestral spirits with the purpose of getting protection and health.
For this episode, we will invite a special guest, Juan Luis Maldonado.
Juan Luis, nice to meet you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in the United States, but I came to live here really young. I'm 18 years old. I live here in Mexico City. My grandparents are Spanish.
Sounds nice. Okay, so we just heard that you went abroad for a couple of months last semester. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I went to Australia, to Sunshine Coast, for 5 months last semester as an exchange program. Well, it was really weird. I don't really know how I ended up there because it's really far away, but I really like it. The people there are completely different than here. The weather, the environment, everything.
And how do you think that experience has helped you become multicultural? Or do you think it helped you at all become multicultural?
I think it did help me because, well, it is a completely different culture. They have completely different values, completely different ways of thinking, completely different ways of literally living their lives. And, well, it helps you expand your horizons, your culture. It helps you adding, well, the culture of others. You can always get something good from them, something bad from them, and you learn, and you become a better person.
Perfect. And do you think that our recent investigations and projects have helped you become multicultural?
I think it has, but definitely the best way to learn about another culture and to become more open-minded and multicultural would be just going to another country and living that culture.
Perfect.
Because it's really different to live the culture than to research it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Juan Luis. Thank you, Juan Luis. So, the three cultures we analyze are located in completely different locations of the world. Despite of that, their perceptions of death are very similar, and this can be traced back to the origins of the countries where these cultures are located. The three countries, Mexico, Argentina, and South Africa, were all colonies at some point of history. Argentina and Mexico were conquered by Spain and deeply influenced by their Catholic religion, and South Africa by England and their Christianity. These foreign cultures and religions merged with the native, making a new one. Of course, different factors and events in each region also affect the way a culture develops. For example, a set of events that has shaped the Mexican culture would be the political oppression in the 20th century by the PRI that eventually led to the war on drugs. For Argentina and the Italians living there, the events that shaped them to be how they are nowadays would be their military dictatorships and the role of the army in them. For the Zulus, all their wars with the British and the apartheid in South Africa. But what really shapes culture is how society reacts to these events and how they overcome it. In Argentina, the people have been driven into almost hating the army and completely rejecting conflict, making society take matters seriously and being respectful and serious towards death. In Mexico, something very different happened. Instead of rejecting drug trafficking and corruption, it has been normalized. But that is present in our everyday life and something that nobody can do anything to change it, shaping the Mexican society to be conformist and apathetic. And for the Zulus, the discrimination and conflicts they have suffered has made them stay away from modern society in order to protect themselves. And because the more modern industrial world goes against their respect towards nature and supernatural forces that keep everything in balance. But as mentioned before, they all share the fact that the three cultures that were mentioned were all influenced by the European powers during the times of colonization. In a personal level, the experiences that we all had have influenced our perception of what multiculturality is. Every single person has its own perception of their own culture and towards others. Nevertheless, it is essential to keep an open mind to other ideas. This will enrich you as a person and your life's vision. Culture is more than the language you speak and the country you live in. Culture is also the way you speak, the way you walk, how you greet others, what you do when you wake up, how you overcome obstacles, how you react to a problem, the way you deal with the death of someone, the food you eat, the music you listen to, even how you receive or reject the culture of others, knowing why you behave like that. Culture is something that if someone tried to analyze every single aspect of it, the person would never finish. But if one decided to do so, he or she would find a big relationship between culture of an individual and the society that surrounds it. And because at the end of the day, it is a part of the human life that will never disappear.